everybody. I'm Jed Kornblue. I am the Executive Director of CCAP, located in Middletown, Connecticut. And we're a youth cycling organization with 3 seasons, mountain bike, road, cyclocross, and we've added a 4th season this year. We do a whole Zwift program from December through March. We just kicked off sort of our slight entry into road season with the Frozen Four that we're helping out with. We do a clinic there for juniors before the race every Sunday. We've got 2 more events left this Sunday and the next, and our mountain bike season will be underway right after that. So we're going to be doing a series of webinars between now and the end of the year, and I'm really happy to introduce the CEO of the New York Velodrome Association, Jim Lyman, to kick off our season this year. So without further ado, Jim, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you very much, Ed. Well, thank you everybody for showing up tonight to talk about my favorite subject, track racing. We're entering, an interesting time. Without last season occurring, I think the momentum slowed down a bit. So I'm going around doing these these seminars and webinars to introduce people to track racing. It's not really meant to be a tutorial that will allow you to get on the track and race right away. We recommend that if you're interested in actually moving forward with track racing, that you attend one of our clinics that we hold at the track, and we'll have those up on Bike Reg. And if you don't have a track bike, we have loaner bikes, so we can help you out there. The other thing is, I assume that we've allotted an hour for this. But I don't have a hard stop. And so if it's all right with Jed, we can keep going if questions take us past the deadline, but I'll leave it up to him since it's his broadcast.
That's fine, Jim. I'd love to keep this going. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about track racing, what it is. And I know I see some people here that are familiar that probably know a little bit more about track racing than I do. So I hope I don't embarrass myself by saying things that they don't agree with. But anyway, let's talk about what I love about track racing, which is community. Here's a picture of a 250-meter indoor track, and this is probably, this photograph was, this photograph was taken at the Olympics. And notice the large crowds of riders in the infield. And there's a community in here. These different sections here, or stalls they're called, are filled with riders from different countries, but they all know each other and for the most part live in the same ecosphere of cycling, and they have to be friends with one another. And what I love about track cycling is after you beat the pants off of each other on the track, you get off the track, you go into the infield and hang out with the people that were just trying to kill you. It breeds a really great sense of community, and some of my best friends are track riders that not only race locally at the track I'm at, Casina in Queens, but also T-Town. I have great friends from the track up in Canada that I race at, Milton, people that Facebook me all the time. And it's just my favorite part of the sport is the friends I make. Sometimes, and the racing is important too, but sometimes I go really just to, see the people that I know. Let's talk about a track bike. What is a track bike? It's very different than a road bike. Let's start at the bottom and work our way up. This is a Fuji Track Elite, which is, if you're interested in sort of a medium end bike, this is an incredibly affordable bike that Fuji makes. And it's been stress tested by some pretty oversized, big-legged track sprinters, and it hasn't broken into pieces. So it's a great bike and considered pretty stiff. And so if you already have lower end track bike and you're looking to move up, this is an interesting bike. It does have some interesting problems in terms of this, in terms of the geometry, in that it has a very tall stack and a very short reach. So if you have long arms and a big body trunk like I have, it's not the best bike to buy. So if you do buy a bike, I do recommend talking with a bike fitter that's experienced with track bikes. because under the rules, there are limitations about how long the stem can be, for instance, and the measurement's really like the end of the handlebars to versus the axle, that distance there. Things like that, can really mess you up if you buy the wrong size bike, if it's too small, for example. So let's talk a little bit about the track bike in general. Starting at the bottom bracket, track bikes have a higher bottom bracket, and that's because when you're in the turns, you don't have brakes to slow down, and you don't want to, if your bike is standing straight up, you have a risk of the pedals hitting the banking on the steeper tracks, like for instance, the 250-meter tracks. So your bottom bracket is higher to avoid that happening. The other thing is the cranks are generally shorter. So on the road, I ride with a 172.5 crank, and on the track I ride with a 165. The other reason why you go with a smaller crank is if you the fit on the bike is more aggressive. I'm much more my track bike versus my road bike has a much larger drop from the seat to the handlebars, and so you're much deeper down. You're much more aggressively postured on the bike, and as a result, in order to keep your open up your hip angle, keep your legs from hitting your stomach, you have shorter cranks. So those are two reasons why I have shorter cranks. As you can see, no brakes. So a track bike is a fixed gear bike. So as the cranks turn, the wheels turn, and if you do need to slow down, you backpedal a little bit. But on the track, while you're racing, hopefully you'll never have to do that. You'll never have to slow down. You definitely don't have to slow down for turns. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. The way you change gears on a track bike is changing the chain ring and changing the cog on the wheel. And when you get really good at it, you can change gears, within 5-6 minutes between races. Because sometimes for different races you have different gearing. But we'll talk about the collection of gears you should get. Other things worth noting, of course, you don't have a derailleur, but look at the dropouts. The dropouts are horizontal in the back, so that as you go with a bigger chain ring or a bigger cog, your wheel can absorb that by moving in on the dropout. Or if I change to a smaller cog, but I keep the same chain ring, you have to absorb the distance, so you move further out. Sometimes you need to have separate chains for different combinations, but that's pretty rare. The other thing about track bikes is the handlebars are narrower. So on the road, I ride with a 44 width on the handlebars because for long rides, if my arms are in, it compresses my shoulders and it's uncomfortable. But on the track, your longest race, for me at least, has been about 40 minutes. You don't have to worry so much about pressing your shoulders in. And on the track, because you tend to be in closer quarters with other riders, you want to have a smaller width handlebar. So these handlebars on my track bike are, I believe, 38.7, something like that. And it's definitely narrower. It's a little harder to get used to, but once you get used to it, you just feel so much more secure. It allows you to, again, get into tighter places, which sometimes happens in track racing. Another thing I want to point out, if you look at the back of the bike under the seat, it's a little hard to see, but you'll see a Garmin. And the Garmin is attached under the seat. It's not visible to me as the rider. It's not on this Garmin mount that's on the stem. And the reason for that is in track racing, we don't allow you to have your Garmin or your computer visible. So the rule reads visible. Some people actually will just have the Garmin upside down underneath the handlebars. You could put tape on it, and technically that would be legal also. But in track racing, we don't have computers on our bike because you need 110% of your attention on the race. And you need to feel, and here's another interesting thing about track racing, is that the bigger you think about yourself on the bike as being in a bubble, and the bigger your bubble, the more competitive you'll be. And what I mean by that is, if you're very focused on your space and you're very focused on looking forward, you lose track of what's going on the side of you and behind you. And you need to have a big picture view in track racing to know what's going on. And so you want to expand that bubble. So you want to get rid of all those things that are going to take away from your attention. And bike computers are very bad when it comes to remove your attention. In track racing, generally, you can ride with, well, actually in all racing, this is kind of a funny thing. In all racing, technically, you are allowed to ride with solid wheels, but on the road where you don't see it because it tends to be kind of windy. But you'll see fairly often on tracks, people will have a solid disc in the back, and they'll have either a 5-spoke or 3-spoke wheel like this, or just a deep front wheel. At Casino, where sometimes it gets windy in the springtime, we don't have a specific rule in place, but we ask riders on the really windy days not to have a deep dish type rim. Another thing, and then we'll move on, is you'll see this, I don't know if you can see my arrow pointing here, but I have like there's this little thing on the top tube there. That's a protector. So if I let go of the handlebars and they swing all the way in, this little stopper here catches the top of the handlebar, because unlike a road bike, which has brake cables which act as a stopper, there is no stopper, and you don't want the handlebars to hit the top tube. Otherwise, if it's carbon, it'll crack it. So that's something to think about if you're looking at bikes. All right, moving on to the next slide. Let's see. Whoops, there we go. This bike, I should say, before we move on, is set up for mass start, or a little bit for sprinting as well. This bike is set up for pursuit. It looked, just so you know, this particular bike is an adaptation of the Cervelo P3 from the mid 2000s, and what they did was they beefed it up so it's stiffer, because track riders put down generally more power. So it has a taller gusset here over the bottom bracket, and then it's just generally built with a higher level of or stiffer carbon. But this is the setup we use in pursuit, or what it's our time trial on the track. Nothing else. I should mention that the measurement process for pursuit bikes is very complicated. So if you're interested in doing time trialing on the track and doing pursuit, and you want to learn how to set up the bike, reach out to me and I can give you the information. The measurements are just it's a very arcane setup to do that. One thing I'll point out is that the setup I have on this bike is much more aggressive than the setup I would have on a road TT bike, because the pursuit for me, which is a 2K, is basically something around a 2.5-minute event. So I can get super aggressive and live that way for 2.5 minutes, but for an 11-mile time trial, you couldn't do it, and certainly not for an Ironman. All right. Oh, the other thing is you'll see in time trialing, particularly indoors. You'll see people using a front disc. They also will use it for other timing events. Outdoors is a little tricky, just to, because if there's wind, it'll be tough to control the bike. All right, here's a picture of just your more basic track bike. I just bring this out because this is a very affordable way of getting into track racing. And the Fuji is this bike. When I bought it, it was called a Fuji Track 1.1. They rebranded it. Now they call it the Track Pro. But it's an incredibly affordable way to get into the sport. It's an aluminum frame with a carbon fork and carbon seat post, but it performs really well, and it does the job great. Let's see, moving on. Just thought I'd show you a picture of tandems. There was a period of time in the sport where tandem bike racing was very big on the track. And it's just not as big as it used to be. In fact, it's minuscule now, but there's talk of trying to bring it back. T-Town has a annual event called the Tandemonium, which is sort of the last vestige of the game, but I think it's going to come back. You also see tandems in events for disabled riders. And this picture, by the way, is at T-Town. Moving on, this is a gear bag. I talked about changing gears, and when you get into track riding and you have various gears, you're going to have all this equipment. But if you get into it and you're going to race at Casina, you don't need all this in your first year. You'll probably need two chain rings, 48 and 49. And two cogs, a 14 and a 15. You'll need a chain whip, and you'll probably need an Allen key to do the chain ring bolts, and that's about it. So you don't have to buy a massive amount of equipment to get started. As you get more experience, you'll find out what chain rings you need and what cogs you need. But the small selection I mentioned is enough to get started. Let's talk about the different types of tracks, because they're all different and they behave differently. So this isn't a track. This is that's a really terrible image. I should have found a better one. But Red Bull was doing this challenge in Brooklyn, and they built this like funny little track. I thought it was kind of cute, so I threw the picture in there. This isn't a track either, but I show you the picture because I want to, for those of you that are nervous about riding and banking, I want to show you that you can ride on some of the steepest banking and not fall down. You just need to have enough speed so the forces keep you attached to the track. But this is proof positive that you can ride a bike on a very steeply banked track and not fall down. So let's talk about real tracks. I'll start at the lower right-hand corner. This is Casina. Casina is a 400-meter track. So back in the 60s, I guess, 400-meter tracks were sort of the state of the art. That was the Olympic state of the art. The banking is very modest at about 15 degrees or 17 degrees, depending on who you talk to. And it's a good way to get started. You get the sense of riding on the track. The banking is enough so that as you're going through the turns, you don't have to worry about slowing down. And that's why you have banking, so that you can just speed through the turns and not worry about slowing down. And that's actually brings me to a good point, which is frankly that what I love about track cycling is the bikes don't have brakes. A lot of people say, oh my God, they don't have brakes, it's dangerous. But the years of road racing that I did, I kind of learned that brakes were the dangerous part of bikes. And that, if the person in front of you had a reaction and grabbed a handful of brake, that tended to not be a great thing. On the track, you don't have brakes, so you don't have those sort of instantaneous shocks. I will say a casino where it can get kind of windy sometimes. When you hit a headwind, people slow down, but that's a little more predictable because you know you're turning into the wind. But for those of you that are fearful of track because the bikes don't have brakes, I will tell you that I think that what makes track riding more predictable is that it doesn't have brakes. And so it's something to sort of embrace, not be concerned about. Let's talk about the next size track in the lower left-hand corner, where these guys are riding these penny farthings. This is Trexlertown. That track is a 333 meters. The banking, I want to say, is in the low 30s. That was the sort of state of the art of the 70s, and I think some of the 80s. A few of the Olympic tracks were that size. It's still, Trexlertown is still a very fast track if you ask a lot of international riders, and they love riding there. And it's a beautiful surface. It's starting to age a little bit, and actually they're going to go through a major rebuild, I think, next year. But they maintain the track beautifully, and it's just a wonderful place to race. Let's talk about the next one in the upper right-hand corner. That track is a 250 meter. This is a concrete track that's down in Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's called Giordano. It's one of the few concrete 250s I know of. Generally 250s are wood. And that's because the engineering, you were trying to deal with how do you take slabs of concrete and lay them out with such banking. And the banking here, I believe, is something around low 50s, 53, 54 degrees. The surface being concrete, they were able to kind of sort of build into the concrete a sort of a rougher textured surface. So it's not slippery. It's not a very fast track because of that, but it's also a track where the surface isn't slippery and you won't slide down if you're going too slow. But on the negative side of that is if you're going too slow, the bike, when you go fast, your bike angles over, right? But when you're going slower, going through the turns, you're not angled over as much. So you risk a pedal strike. And so when you ride a 250, you want to have at least about probably about 18 miles per hour speed when you're going through the banking, so that you don't have a pedal strike. But 18 miles an hour it seems like a lot to some people who are beginners on bikes, but when you're on a track and you get the momentum behind you, you don't really notice it. The next track, this is I believe a 133. It's a wood track that's up in London, Ontario. It's called Forest City Velodrome. And Forest City was built, I forgot when it was built, but it's actually built inside of what used to be an ice skating rink. And so they needed a nice small track could fit in that range. And so you can see the very significant banking. The surface here is actually plywood, I believe. So instead of what you see like on some of the really nice tracks where you have planking, this is actually plywood sheets. Very, very tough track to ride because it's so banked and because it's so fast. They have a gear restriction on there, so you don't go too fast because then you don't control the bike well. So that's a very unusual track. So moving on. Here's another track. You didn't know, I bet you didn't know this, but there are such things as grass tracks. This track is in Kansas, and I believe this is the track where one of our national team riders got to start, Ashton Lambie, who actually I think still holds the the world record in the pursuit. He's just a really talented rider. But here it is. It's a grass track, no banking. I have no idea how they don't avoid pedal strikes, but I guess it's because you just don't go that fast in grass. But they do exist. I think grass tracks are pretty. I think there are a few in the UK and some down in the Caribbean. So anyway, if you can't build a nice concrete track, sometimes you just got to make do with a field of dreams. Let's talk about the markings on the track, and I just have this picture of a 250-meter track. And let's start at the bottom of the track and work our way up. So the warm-up area, what we call the infield, is generally where everyone congregates between races. This blue line is the out-of-bounds line, or what is called the Côte d'Azur. And the out-of-bounds line is basically, if you're in the middle of a race, a mass start race, and you go down into the blue area, that's technically not, it's not that you fouled or that you'll get tossed out. It's just it's the only time it becomes an issue if you go into that area is if you're passing underneath someone, or during a pursuit or timed event. They'll put what you call sponges, they're actually sponges that you can run over to warn you, to get you out of the blue area. But we call it's really, people for the most part call it the out of bounds area, but the technical name is Côte d'Azur. The black line is the measurement line. So when we say a track is a 250 or a 400 or a 333, that measurement is taken at the black line. So that is technically, if you're doing a timed event and you ride that black line all the way around, you are riding the shortest distance. Now, the red line outside of the black line, and this is a little tough to see, but that's a lane between the black and red line. It's called the sprinter's lane. Some people call it the pole lane, but I think the technical term is sprinter's lane, really. And there are a whole bunch of rules that dictate when you are in the sprinter's lane, what you can do and what you can't do. And if a rider is behind you, what that rider can do. And I'm not going to go into that kind of detail now because we don't have all the time, but it's important when you start to read the rules to learn about the sprinter's lane and what rules apply to it. The next line up is the stayers line. It is more of a, how would I say this? It doesn't actually have a function in the mass start racing that we do in the US during the racing, but it serves other purposes. For example, when we're out on a training day and the track is filled with many people doing different things, generally the rule of thumb is if you're cooling off or you're riding slowly, you ride above the stayers line. And anyone going fast and doing a super hard sprint effort is in the sprinter's lane. And the other rule is the slower you are, the higher up you go on the track effectively. So the stayers line is really more of just a way of indicating where, when you're practicing, if you're not doing efforts, where you should be. You should be above the stayers line. The other thing about the stayers line that you should know is when you're racing, it's very interesting. If you're in the middle of a mass start race, you got 25 riders on the track, and the group and everyone's sort of grouped up, and maybe you're not doing the group is going hard, but it's not streamed out. In other words, they're all packed up in the group on the track. Generally, you're going to see everyone above the stayers line. And tactically, the thing to do is not be the low person at the bottom, because if there's going to be an attack and the attack is done, if you can see my cursor, if the attack is done, let's say here out of the turn, you can use the banking to dive down and accelerate. And if you're already at the bottom of the track, you don't have that advantage. So you're in a tactical disadvantage when you're down there. So the stayers line, you'll notice, is a place where in a race, as people come off of a hard effort, and maybe after an attack or something like that, you'll see everyone is above the stayers line. And that seems to be a good indication point of where you want to be at those points. The start finish line is over here. There's a line called the pursuit line. So when we do our pursuits, the starting block is here, and you finish either, depending on the length of your race, you either finish on this pursuit line or this pursuit line. It's called the pursuit, by the way, because technically you'll have two riders riding at one time. Someone who starts on the front straight of the track, and someone who starts on the back straight, and they chase each other around the track. And sometimes you'll see someone get past. So that's the origin of the name Pursuit. I think that's pretty much everything worth talking about on track markings. I just wanted to show you a copy of the rules. Let's see. I can't actually open up this how do you call it, this link, but the rules on track racing are very good compared to other forms of racing. You know, the chapter 2 is a very detail oriented part of the rule book, and it goes into all kinds of how the different races are raced, but it also talks a little bit in terms of etiquette or what you do when you're in the sprinter's lane. I talked about that before. So if you're going to get into track racing, I recommend you open up this link and review it and learn all the details about track racing. Because one of the things about track racing compared to road racing is, I would argue it's a much more regulated part of the sport than road racing. Officials have a view of the whole race. You know, we're up in a stand looking at the whole race, and when we see someone who makes a bad move, who shows poor etiquette, we're going to say something, because officials in track cycling are much more active in making sure that safety protocols are followed in the game. And as a track official, I can tell you that it's much more rewarding than road racing, because you have the whole race in front of you. It's a spectator sport. It's fascinating to watch. And everything happens so quickly for an official in the different formats of racing. So I would argue that track racing is much more regulated. That makes it safer in a lot of ways, and in some ways also more fair. So I definitely believe you should jump in and read the section, this part of the rule book.
Jim, I dropped that link into the chat. So if anybody wants to read that rule book, you can go ahead and click the link in the chat.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Let's talk about the different types of races, and then we'll start to head towards the wrap up. You divide the races into two major categories: sprint events and enduro events. And I'll tell you that within track racing, it's like two separate cultures. It's like, if you're into languages, it's like the people I know that are Portuguese from Portugal versus the people that I know from Brazil. They both speak Portuguese, but they don't have the ability to talk to one another. The languages, the dialects are so different. And there's a little bit of that in the track racing. Although we all love each other because we ride track, sprinters are a very different breed from enduros and vice versa. And it's funny, on Facebook, there's the Track Sprinters Facebook page, which was very active for a while, not so active for a long time, and now it's active. It's becoming more active again. And if an enduro asked an endurance type question like, you know, how should I handle power, blah, 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 for 5-minute efforts, the whole group would just start, you know, ragging on the person, like, you take that question over to the enduro page. So it's kind of, that's sort of the fun part of the sport, but it's definitely two different cultures. Whoops. Okay, let's talk about the sprint events first. So the timed events in sprint, first one is the flying 200. That is the time trial for deciding the seating in match sprints or in Keurans. And there's a whole complex way of building up speed and eventually you build up speed for, depending on the track, for a lap or a lap and a half, and then just roll down into the sprinter's lane at full speed and do your time. And that's why it's called a flying 200. So in a 250, it's 3 laps, 2 and a quarter, 2 and a third, I guess you would say, are your buildup of your speed, getting up to full speed. And then in that last 200, you're hitting at full speed and you've rolled down the track because you're building up speed all the way up here. If you look in this upper left-hand picture, you're building up speed all the way at the top of the track. And then when the time comes, you go down track. So that's the flying 200. There's a lot of detail behind how you attack the flying 200. And there are articles on how you build up speed. It's a very technical thing, and sprinters spend a lot of time thinking about it. Other timed events that are sprint oriented, the 500 meter and I'm in my age group in the at Worlds, I ride 500. If I was 5 years younger, I'd be riding a 750 meter. Great thing about those races, particularly the 500, is it's painful, but it's fast. It's just, when it's over, you know, it's inside of 30 seconds. I'm sorry, well, for me, inside of 40 seconds. And it's a quick and it's over, but it's a painful, you know, around 40 seconds for me. For the elite riders or the younger riders, the kilo or 1000, and that is probably the most difficult event on the track. They say in the kilo that when you get into like the last lap, you can't feel your body. Your arms are cold because all the blood is drained from them, and you know, you have tunnel vision. But you know, that's what sprinters love, that kind of pain. But for all of us who are, you know, now, for the most part, I see a lot of masters riders that are in the group here. You won't be doing kilo, but the juniors do kilos when they get to a certain age. Team sprint is basically, you know, it's a 2-person. It's like team time trialing on the road, except it's a sprint. And I'll show you a video later on. The non-timed events are the Keurin. So in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the Keurin, where for a certain number of laps, you're paced up to speed by what's called a derny, which for the most part is a motorcycle. Then the derny releases you, and then you have a couple or 3 laps, depending on the track size, of then just all-out sprinting. And the next one, the match sprint, is demonstrated in the upper right hand and a little bit in the upper left hand. These riders are positioning themselves for when they take off at full speed, who's going to be able to make the pass and eventually win. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that these 2 riders are doing a track stand. And what happened here is, if you're watching this on TV, the front rider wanting not to be the front rider because you want to be in the draft of the back rider you want to be in the draft, not be the leader, decided to try to shake the rider behind. So this rider went up track and then stops and then does a track stand, and the rider behind hopefully tries to mimic that, and so doesn't lose their behind position. But if they're shaken loose, they will then have to leave the track stand, and then they'll be in the front position, and this rider will have taken advantage, will have the advantage. When they wind up for speed, the rider in front of them will take the breeze for him. The current rules in track put a time limit on how long you can track stand, but before those rules were put in place, I think the record was about 15 minutes of just standing there like that. This rider here in the lower left-hand corner, that's a track sprinter. Look at those legs. That is, I just drew a blank on his name. It's killing me. He's a German rider who's more known for the size of his legs than he is for his performance as a world-class track sprinter, but puts on a good show anyway. The final race I mentioned here is a chariot race. We do that a lot at Casino. It's basically a race where we line up all the riders on the starting line, and they're with holders. And when the gun goes off, or whistle actually, the holders push the bikes, and then for one lap, you just sprint as hard as you can. And it's a fun race, and it's if you're a very strong sprinter and get on top of your gears fast and you can hold it for a long time, you'll do really well in the chariot at a track like Casino. All right, let's talk about the endurance events. The timed events, the individual pursuit, for us older folks, it's 2K. As you get younger, 3K, and then elite is 4K. Team pursuit, just like team time trialing, that's a 4K. You'll look in the upper right-hand corner. These riders here are all lined up, ready for the team pursuit. And when the gun goes off, the rider in the starting block will take the lead, and they'll fall in behind that rider. And then there's a whole strategy for when they'll be switching positions and who's going to take the efforts and how long they're going to do it. It's a very interesting, very, very technical game to play. There's a lot of thinking. My team pursuit team spent hours trying to figure out who should lead off, who should do 2 laps instead of 1 lap, and so on. So there's a lot of thought behind it. Now, in the mass start events, there are a whole slew of different races, and I'm not going to go into the details of it. But the great thing about track racing is that it's not just, there's only one race called the scratch race, where the race starts and the first person to finish wins. That's the only race like that, really. Well, there is another race called the Win and Out that's like that. But they all have different formats and different ways of winning. I might not be the first in a points race. I might not be the first person to finish, but I could win the race, because you have intermediate sprints where you collect points. You get points for lapping the field. There's all kinds of different strategies you can employ. And that's a great thing about track racing, is that it's not always about pure strength. A lot of it is about tradecraft, about using skill to do things. But this is just a sampling of the many different types of race formats that we have. There are many more, and it just makes for a really fun game. One thing I want to point out is, and people will ask this often, if you're on a fixed gear bike, how do you start the race? Like in a road race, you have 1 foot down, the whistle's blown, and then you kick off, and then you clip it and go. And on the track, you can't do that because it's a fixed gear. When we start a race, everyone lines up on the rail. They hold the rail. The official will give the instructions to the riders. They blow a whistle, and that indicates you can leave the wall. Everyone rides slowly until they congregate into a nice pack, and then a second whistle will actually start the race. And so it's a little bit like NASCAR, I guess. You know, you have a pace car in that case, but everyone stays congregated together, and then when the signal goes, the race starts. I was in this lower right-hand corner. I want to show you a picture of a race called the Madison, which was named after Madison Square Garden. That race is a team race. Effectively, you have 2 riders in each team, and one rider is racing and the other rider is in recovery at the top of the track. And when it comes time to trade off and relieve the rider in the race slings the new rider in. It's a very tricky kind of race from a actual bike handling standpoint, but it's a fast race. The speed of a Madison race versus the same length of a scratch race, it's noticeably faster. Why? Because when a rider is in the race, they're going hard, and they can then recover during the relief period while the other rider is riding hard. So it's a very fast race, but it's also a very technical bike handling oriented race. You don't see it very much in the US anymore, but people are trying to bring it back. And there'll be Madison clinics probably at T-Town this year if anyone's curious about it. I'm going to show you a quick video. I have to unshare and reshare to do that. Let's see, share. Here we go. All right, does everyone see the video? This is a team sprint. Team sprint for women is 2 riders. Team sprint for men is 3 riders. I don't know why, frankly, the UCI hasn't gone to 3 riders for women. They increased the number of riders for women's pursuit, but they didn't do it for women's sprint. And I just, for the life of me, I can't figure out why. But the 2 women here racing the team sprint are my teammates, Cami Cornelli and, excuse me, I can't think. Christine Dercole, excuse me. Pardon me. And they currently actually are the team sprint world champions in, I believe, the 45 plus women's category. So this photograph was taken at Milton, or this video was taken at Milton a couple of years ago. It's a little old now, but I want you to get a sense of how it works and how they ride the track. So here we go. And that is that. All right, so that concludes my formal presentation. I guess we can open it up for Q&A, Jed.
Sure. So if you've got any questions, you can unmute yourself, and let's be kind to each other and try not to talk over each other. If you maybe you feel like you were missed, you can drop your question in the chat. But let's go through. Does anybody have any questions on any of the topics that Jim covered tonight? Don't be shy. Jim, when do you expect track racing to start in New York this summer or this spring?
All right.
I'm putting you on the spot here. Yeah.
That is a great question, and it's up to the COVID gods a little bit. But there is a plan to have some racing starting in May. That's going to be the Lucarelli and Cristaldi series, 6 days of Casina. The actual date hasn't been set yet. The concern there, but they're going to go as far forward as they can, is the city is kind of vague on their regulations, and they're waiting for permitting. I can't say for sure when, what's going to happen there, because it's not my event and I haven't been part of, but they are working hard to make sure it happens. And they haven't set the exact date, but they said sometime in May. It's going to be the 6 days is 6 days of racing over 3 weekends. That's why it's called 6 days. As for the Twilight series on Wednesday nights and the Vi 13 series that we run on the weekends, we haven't set any specific dates. I have my fingers crossed for late June. And then we have to see. A little bit of it has to do with what the city is going to mandate on us. It's a little bit harder in the city than it is in some other locations. The racing at T-Town, I haven't heard specifics, but I heard rumor they're trying to get it going, and Lehigh County has some pretty tough regs also. The racing down in Rock Hill is definitely going to be happening starting this month. A few of us are going to be going down there. So that's all I know. Now I see someone that's asking about clinics. As soon as we can, we're going to start to have clinics. The clinics generally call it 2 to 3 hours. They're on weekends, we just charge enough to pay the cost of renting the track and the permits. I don't know, it's something like $15 a person or something like that. I haven't seen the latest numbers. And that, I would like to try to start that in late, hopefully sometime in late May. The limitation is not as hard there because the group is smaller. So it might be easier to do that. So I'm going to start to try to push for that. Probably late May.
That's great. Someone asked, for someone completely new to track racing, when is a good time to visit the Casina track?
It's always a good time to visit the track. So Casina is different than other tracks in that it's an open park facility. So some tracks are highly regulated, and you can only use the track if you're certified by the track operator, or you can only go there if there's supervision. Casina is wide open. The only times you can't use the track is when it's permitted for either track racing events or for our junior programs that use the track for training. And we have on the Casina velodrome.info site a calendar, and you can see when the track has been booked with permits there. When it's not booked, you can just show right up. You can go out on the track and ride. You just go right in there. And we ask that you observe that those rules of etiquette that I mentioned, where, if you're going, the slower you go, the further up the track you go. Only go into the sprinter's lane if you're making a very hard effort. Oh, and the other thing is communication in track racing. In track racing, we do a lot of talking in the middle of a race. When you're making a move underneath someone and you're not confident about whether they're going to make the same move with you, sometimes you'll say, stay, just like that. If I hear stay, I know something's about to happen. Just keep my line. So if you're going to make a move, say stay. So if you're going to pass someone while you're on the track, and you're just training, no one and a bunch of kids are there, just say stay before you pass them, so they know not to move to left or the right or whatever. They'll just keep their straight line. Sometimes you'll hear roadies say, hold your line or something along those lines. In track, we don't say hold your line. We don't say on your inside or on your right or on your left. First of all, it takes too much energy to say on your right. Plus, I have to think like, am I on his right or on his left before I say it? You don't have time to think about such things because in a track race, everything's happening so fast. So just use one word, which is stay. And those are some quick etiquette. Another etiquette thing I'll point out, by the way, is sometimes in training, people are riding pretty close to the rail. If you're riding high up on the track and they're going to try to go between you and the rail, you might hear them, if they're coming from behind, they'll say rail like that. That means don't head close to the rail. Give them space to go by. And that's just always a good little piece of etiquette.
What about clinics? There was a question about clinics, whether does someone just show up with their cleats and helmet? Are there bikes that Casino owns that they can use?
Yeah, so we do have loaner bikes. When we set up the clinics, we'll add, on Bike Reg, there'll be a way to ask for a loaner bike. The loaner bikes have traditional toe clip type pedals, but we suggest you bring your own pedals and your own shoes so that you get the experience that you're used to, your connectivity with the bike that you're used to. But if you don't have cleats or pedals, we do have old-fashioned toe clips. We'll only do clinics through Bike Reg. And for insurance reasons, we need to make them USAC sanctioned events. So we have proper insurance coverage.
This is a good question. Jim, you had a lot of gear in your track bag. As a new rider, if I show up with a bike and a helmet, won't other folks help me out with gears, pump, etc.? So what's the etiquette? What's the culture like? And are people willing to loan equipment or give a hand?
That's always tough to say. I used to be great at loaning equipment. I've kind of become a little less of a lender because I've had too many chain whips disappear on me. So, sometimes you just get a little bit more jaded, but I'm always there willing to loan someone something, if they're in sight. Will I loan you my carbon disc? No, but it's hard to say, but I would say if you come to the track first time racing and you're doing novice or what used to be called Cat 4, Cat 5 rather, I suggest that you have their gearing should be, I believe, a 48 15 48 chain ring and a 15 cog should be the gearing, or I think that would probably be the best starting point. It depends whether you're talking about a big field or a little field. Big fields go faster. We had a few years ago the Cat, back then a Cat 5 field at 6 days was made up of all bike messengers, and they were faster than the 1, 2, 3s because there were all these like super strong bike messengers who race, who do fixed gear, crits and things like that. So, it's a little unpredictable, but yeah, people tend not to loan out cogs and chain rings just because you only have one, and they're expensive. But if someone is starting off and they want to figure out best gear combinations, just reach out to me. I'll put my my email address in the chat.
So I think this is probably a pretty common question. So if you're new and say a master's rider, where would you slot into racing? You jump right in as a 40+ rider, or do you start with the novice riders?
Yeah, so technically the way we run our races, if you're master's level, you need to be 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, things have changed with the new USAC system, right? Now, instead of Cat 5, you have novice. You can self-select up into Cat 4 instead of the old days of needing 10 races. At Casino, we have different rules, and we've been blessed by, or I shouldn't say we've been blessed. We've been approved by USAC to have our own rules, which is that you cannot become a Cat 4 until we upgrade you to be a Cat 4. In fact, we at Casino, we handle all New York State track upgrades at our track. It's not done by USAC. It's not clear to me how New England or New Jersey or the non-track local associations will be handled. But at Casino, we do the upgrades for New York riders, not USAC, which is the new methodology. And we will not upgrade you to Cat 4 until you have a minimum number of races. And the minimum number of races, we're looking for, you know what, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say it, but we're looking for either a clinic and a certain number of races, or without the clinic, more races. It's either 7 or 10. I'm all of a sudden just drawing a blank. But to find out the rules, go to casinovelodrome.info, and you'll look under track racing rules, and you'll see our upgrade procedures.
So I think I know the answer to this just from my history in the sport, but what's the transferability of skills from track to track? So if you're a Cat 3 at Casino, is that transferable to, say, Alcac or LA?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So LA is a 250-meter wood track. It's a very slippery track, and it's a badly shaped track. It's an old cigar style track, so it tends to have really weird transitions. And so as a result, LA is a tougher track to ride. So you might be strong as hell at Casino, and you might be strong as hell at T-Town. But the folks at Carson out in LA, they will not allow you to race that track unless you have a certification from that track, except for USAC events, which they don't hold that many, because they'll do like American Track Racing Association sanctioned events more than anything else. So 250s require a little bit more understanding and skill sets, and the tracks are more supervised than a 333 or a 400. Now, in terms of pure fitness, people say that if you're strong at Casino, you'll be strong anywhere. And there's some truth to that, because at Casino, it's a slow surface, it's windy, it's just a hard track to ride, it toughens you up. But there's a lot of tactical things that don't transfer well from Casino to 250s. For instance, I do much better on a 250 in certain types of races than I do at Casino, and vice versa. It depends on the race, because my experience and skill set of using the banking and so on. So there is some transfer, and sometimes there's not.
Okay. I know that I can see we have a couple of officials in here, so I think this question is pretty good. Can non-track officials attend your clinics at Casino to get some track officiating experience? And maybe if not, do you hold specific official clinics at Casino?
We are going to hold at some point this year, and we've done it in the past, a presentation on track officiating. Alan Atwood created this 50-page PowerPoint. It's gorgeous. I mean, this is a work of art, and only Alan can do such a thing. And he goes over the minutia of track officiating, and so we will do that. He's designed it for people who currently are officials. Now, if you want to become an official, USAC has really made the process a lot easier. You don't have to go to in-person clinics anymore. You can do it online. You read a series of PowerPoints and other documents, and then you can take the test. They have, I forgot how it works mechanically. I think it's through Google Drive. If you pass the test, it's all online. And then you have to go through all the other aspects of official certification, like Safe Sport, and then the background check. And then you got to write the check to USAC for the officiating license. So if you're interested in track officiating and you're not an official, take a look at the USAC officiating program. You don't need, it's very user friendly. You just have to, do it. But once you have your officiating license, probably maybe in a month and a half or so, maybe in a month, I'll push on Alan to do his famous clinic. And this thing is, you walk away and you are just stuffed with knowledge. It's awesome.
I'm going to call him out because I know Dave's watching this this webinar right now. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the junior programs that are really active at Casina, and maybe how to get involved with those?
Hey, Dave, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So,
oh, by the way, this is David Harrison from Star Trek. He's one of he along with Pete Taylor are the people that make it happen. Okay, go right ahead.
all right. Well, thanks for calling me out there, Jed. I appreciate it. I'm not a big public speaker, but whatever. We'll get through this. Yeah. So, Star Trek is a track cycling program at Casino Velodrome. That's our home track. We also have a road element to our team as well. But our main focus is our kids on the track. So I did see, and I'll just address real quick, I saw somebody had mentioned something about bringing kids to the track. So I'd be the one you reach out to for that and make those arrangements. And we do run clinics for teams periodically as well, if anybody wants to do just a kids clinic. So we have approximately 130 kids in our program. We just, as a matter of fact, I was doing 2 meetings at once while I was listening to you before. Just getting ourselves in line to start on April 12th. We're going to be starting the program. Again, 130 plus kids this semester we're going to have. And we take kids from all, basically from all over. The majority of them are from New York City, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Long Island. We have a couple of kids who do come in from upstate New York, some from Connecticut who come on once a week to join our team. And we take kids racing from our local track to Pennsylvania. When the season's open, we'll go up to Canada. And we also take kids. We've had like 15 kids at nationals last year out in California. So we have a big race team, everywhere from learning how to ride right up to an elite race team. We're a three-stage program where we have beginner riders that can get into our development team once they start racing. And our development team has kids as young as 12 on it. If the kids get serious and they're really working hard. And then we go from our development team, we have an elite team that does race throughout the world. They race in Europe. We have had kids on the world's, junior world's teams, and they race everywhere. We also strongly encourage women, and I also host a couple of women's clinics throughout the season, and or just try and do a women's development program a few nights a week. I see a couple of women are on here now that I've worked with. We just find that the women seem to be unsupported on the track a lot, and they come out and they race, and Casino has a great turnout for women, so it's a really good spot if you're a woman racer and wanting to learn. There is a nice group, and they support each other. But a lot of them have come to us and said, hey, I wish we had a program to learn. So we started working with them 1 or 2 nights a week. Anybody has any questions about the program? I'm sorry, I wasn't really prepared for this. So
No, I put you on the spot, Dave. I apologize for that,
Sorry
but
about that.
good opportunity for you. Yeah, and I believe you guys do have a wait list at this point. Is that correct?
So we typically have a wait list. At one point, about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a wait list that was 125 people long. Took about 2 or 3 years for a kid to get into our program. So we were starting to have kids who were in the program register. The parents would register their kids when they were about 1 year old to make sure they can get on the list and just keep rotating to the top if they couldn't make it in. However, we've added a couple days, we've added coaching, and we've put more kids into each program. So pre-COVID, we were running almost 35 kids a session, sometimes more, where we'd have some kids off the track doing things while some were on, incorporated doing bike maintenance and things like that so that we can keep kids, run a bigger program at the time. We also added an extra night and an extra session on Saturdays in order to accommodate more people. And in doing so, we were able to bring our numbers up, and we actually got rid of the wait list. Some of the people on the wait list had really aged out. So when I say aged out, our program used to end at 14, and then the kids had nowhere to go, and that was the part of the race team or development program that we put in, so that the kids could go from 14 up to U23. When you hit the U23, we have our elite kids, which some of those elite kids are at, once they hit college or 17, 18, they join our elite team. And that's really how that all started. But where was I? On the, as far as the wait list right now has been growing again since COVID. So we worked our wait list down to a 0. By weeding out, kids who joined other sports, kids who decided, they aged out of that. We try not to bring in too many new kids unless you have experience after 14. We try and develop from within as much as possible. We will take kids if there's, hey, I got a 15-year-old son or a 16-year-old kid and they love racing their bike, they want to try the track. Come on, we're going to bring you in. We're going to do everything we can to work with you and make it happen. But the wait list right now, I don't have an exact number. We were just talking about it, and we'll know better in about 2 weeks where that's at. We will definitely have a wait list this after the semester again, but hopefully it's not going to be as big as it used to be. My guess is we'll probably be down to about 25 or 30. That's really due to COVID restrictions, and we'd eliminate that more, and we're trying to. If we could get some lights at our velodrome and we could have another session. Then I just have to start arguments with James because then he gets mad at us for taking too much track time. He can't practice.
Right. I saw a couple other questions, Jed, that I don't do.
Yeah, sure. There was a question about, well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate that update. Question about getting fit on the track. So this is a rider who's a roadie, and what ratio are they leaning toward for sprint events? They think maybe the question might be a little bit too technical, but maybe you can go through the transition from road into track racing with a sprint specialty. Yeah.
Before I jump in that, I should mention, Dave was talking about the program he's putting together for some of the parents of the junior riders that want to race track. And some of them are new to bike racing and not as fit, but still want to show their competitive chops. So we're going to try to have, I don't know what the word for it is, a master's novice start on our Wednesday night races to give them an opportunity to practice what they're learning from Dave and company. But getting back to the question, very interesting question. There's about 10 hours worth of dialogue I have to answer that, but it just is an interesting thing. If you look at some of the great road sprinters who go back and forth between track and road sprinting, they're enduros, right? You look at Mark Cavendish, I'm trying to think, Viviani.
Viviani's a great example, yeah.
Yeah, Viviani is awesome, right? They're not track sprinters, they are enduros. That's not to say you can't become a track sprinter. My coach, for instance, is a sprinter on the road and also pretty effective track sprinter as well. He doesn't have massive legs, it's not his style, but it tends, that if you're thinking, well, I sprint on the road, therefore I could sprint on the track. Yeah, that's not 100% carryover, but there's potential for it, more so than for me just being, who I am. But how would you to train for it? Well, your question implies that you're trying to train to use bigger gears and to be more muscular. The first thing you should always do in training for track is spin. Spin to win is the old expression. And you need to learn how to develop power output at high cadences and be able to continue that output. And so a lot of my training that I do is about being able to have sustained cadences of over 130, over 140 for a minute or longer while producing power. And so first you got to get the spin, and then you get the gears. Don't use the bike to build the muscles. Do that in the gym with squats and all those other great weightlifting exercises. And there's books on what works on, for track and what doesn't. When you train on the bike, you should be focused on being able to put out your power with high cadences. So when I'm doing VO2 max workouts or anaerobic, high anaerobic threshold workouts, my minimum cadence is usually 105. And then I also do, once a week, I do a half hour of high cadence drills on rollers, where for a half hour, I do 5 minutes at 120, 1 minute at 150, take a break at 120 for 5 minutes, go back to 150 for another minute, and do it 4 times. Now, what does that do? It not only has a cardiovascular impact, but it also improves your muscular coordination, so that you have a nice even round spin. And you need to do it on rollers, not on a trainer, because when you're on rollers, if you have a very sort of square type pedal stroke where you're pushing down hard, and as opposed to something circular, it will show. You will have instability on the rollers. So the rollers drive a very nice circular stroke. The other thing I do with that is in early season is one-legged drills on the trainer, so that you build that circular pattern into your muscle firing. So your neuromuscular coordination has that round aspect. So that's the basis of all track training. And when you get that down, and then you go to the gym and you're working your squats, your deadlifts, your Romanian deadlifts, lunges, whatever, jump squats, whatever you're doing to build, or box jumping towards the latter part of the training season, that's where you're building the muscle. That's where you're building the force that allows you to get on top of a gear faster. It shouldn't be on the bike. The bike is about neuromuscular coordination and spinning.
Great answer. If you had one piece of advice to give a new track rider, what would that be?
Well, have fun, and realize that the first couple of races you're going to feel pretty much out of place, because people are going to do things that don't make sense. You may take your road experience and say, well, at Casita on Wednesday night race, the races tend to be short. So, oh, this is a 5-lap race. I'm just going to go out front and, just tear these guys up. And it just doesn't seem to work that way. It just never does. Because when you go out there on the front and cut the breeze for everybody, and everyone's streamed out behind you, they're taking a break while you're doing all the hard work. So, don't get fooled into the fact that short races mean that your endurance will make up for, your lack of time on the track. The other word of advice is, I talked earlier about that bubble you're in. When you start off on the track, your bubble's small. It's just you and the bike. Try to work on expanding that bubble, having what I call 360 degree vision around the bike, knowing what's going on behind you. Work on hearing. When someone's attacking, you want to be able to feel it or hear it. You also want to get used to being able to have your head on a swivel. Track riders are great at moving, looking around, and not moving the bike with that, right? One of the skills that we do on the track is to ride in the sprinter's lane at a not too fast a speed, but at a reasonable pace, and not look forward. Look at the side of the track. and try to always stay in the sprinter's lane without actually looking where you're going. And if you look at track sprinters, by the way, they spend a big chunk of their time looking, if they're the front guy, looking behind them to see what the other person is doing. So all these things about track are about expanding your vision, your universe, feeling more comfortable. The other thing about track is feel free to, communicate, as I said. If you're making a move, better safe than sorry. Tell someone stay. No, I mean, I've never taken it personally when someone says stay. So on the road, sometimes people will be like, hey, whatever, I know I'm holding my line. But in track, my view of it is it's someone trying to help me to keep the whole thing safer. And I like that. And we're all working together to avoid having an accident while trying to kill each other, and winning the race. So that is the great part about track. Anything else? I would say watch a lot of the videos. And people say don't watch those videos of the World Cups because that's not how racing is for us. I disagree. I think you watch that racing and you start to see why certain things happen. And also you grow to appreciate the art form of racing and what happens. And so I would say YouTube is just filled with great videos with World Cups and Olympics and things like that. I think there's not a lot of great books on track cycling. I've read a few of them and they're just not very helpful. So I wish there were better books, but, feel free to ask people questions. That's the other, you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, Jed, or I think Dave Underhill kind of asked that in his question about, people, is it a helpful community and whatnot? And, feel free to ask questions of people. If they don't look like they're stressed out at the moment, that is, and then, just be open-minded. Don't worry about, not getting good results early on, as long as, and maybe the best thing to do is don't race your first race from the front of the race. That you're not going to see very much and you're going to get run over as you run out of energy and everyone passes you. So that's all I can think of, but I'm sure there are other good pieces of advice that can be shared. Oh yeah, someone, Dave just posted here, check out videos on YouTube from Mickey Moon. Mickey is our videographer at the track, and he does some just great footage, and you can see what's going on. And in the background, because he's photographing or videographing from the race official stand, you can hear the officials, particularly most of the time it's Alan, commenting on what he sees on the track. And he'll say, oh, that guy shouldn't have done that, or I'll bet you so-and-so is going to attack right now. And so there's some good commentary in the background too, but that's definitely a good thing to do. And that's about all I can think of for that question.
Well, this has been great. Jim, thank you very much for giving us your time tonight. I know that we've got a lot of interested folks in our community in Connecticut that are thinking about coming down to race the track or give the track a try. So we'll coordinate something with you and with Dave and Pete from Star Track later this year. I'm excited to have had this time with you guys tonight. If you have any other questions for Jim that didn't get answered tonight, you can email us at info@ctcyclingadvancement.com. This is going to go up on YouTube, so you can comment there and we'll get questions back to Jim. If you've got questions on Star Track, you can send them also to info@ctcyclingadvancement.com, and I'll make sure they get into Dave and Pete's hands.
I'm sorry I was going to jump in. I noticed I was just reading comments. Dave Underhill is one of the top officials at T-Town who's joined us here tonight. Mentioned that if there are any officials out there that are, looking to get some more officiating experience beyond just Casino, T-Town's always looking for help. And they're, you got a world-class crew there of officials to learn from. So, definitely do that. He put his email address in there as well. I'm sorry, I just wanted to point that out.
No, it's great. I didn't realize that we'd missed that comment. So I'm glad you said that. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We're going to be doing more of this season, and we'll hopefully see you at the Velodrome soon.